But let's go ahead and move over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We talked about them, another team that needs a quarterback. Jameis Winston is a free agent, and they have the most cap space in the NFL. But something pretty interesting about the $85 million that they have available is that cap is going to dry up quickly. And I think that's is a thing that a lot of people don't realize. They need to re-sign a quarterback, whether it's Jameis and they give him an extension, maybe they franchise tag him, or just sign someone else. See a lot of people liking the Phillip Rivers to Tampa Bay pick, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I could see it happening. They need to keep their defensive front together. And Shaquille Barrett is just coming off a contract year, so they need to re-sign him. He was pivotal to their run defense, how dominant they were. And they have all those star wide receivers that they got to keep together. Brashad Perriman just is coming off a contract year, and he played extremely well for them with Evans and Godwin out. And then Godwin's probably looking for an extension. He becomes a free agent after 2020. Their offensive line needs help, and they don't even have a starting defensive back. At least it feels like when you watch the game. So they need to make some moves. And just looking at Jameis Winston and Shaq Barrett's contract situations alone, like their market value, they go ahead and re-sign Winston and Barrett. They're already 19th now in terms of overall cap space amongst all NFL teams. So just even looking at that, they actually don't have a ton to work with, even though it feels like they do. Looking at what they have draft-wise, they have the 14th overall pick. Some say, they may try to draft a QB. They also have a second and third round pick as well. I like Jonathan Taylor as a pick for them coming out of the draft. But Alex, how do you feel about this Bucs backfield? It feels like there's a million different directions they could take. But that cap situation certainly hurts.
Yeah, I mean, that's great context on the cap. It's so easy to see a team having, the second most or the fifth most cap space, but you don't take into account like the guys they have to re-sign before that number even matters. Like you think about the Cowboys, they show a lot of cap space, but when you think about like, they have to re-sign Dak, they have to re-sign potentially Amari Cooper, Byron Jones, Jason Witten, Randall Cobb. It's like just to get their guys back is going to, put them really, really close to having no cap space heading into, free agency and signing guys from other teams. So great context there. Really appreciate that. But at the running back position, based on what you just said, I can't see them spending up and going and getting a big name. I know there has been some word of trying to get like a Derrick Henry or a Melvin Gordon because of that cap space and helping out Jameis Winston by, getting a guy who they can give the ball to 25 times a game. I don't see that happening. I think a much more likely situation is that they bring in one of these lesser known guys, one of these guys that isn't really a star, to help out Ronald Jones. And a name I really like for that, I guess this guy was a star but isn't really considered one now, is trying to go out and get David Johnson. I've said it on our pod before. I'm going to say it again. I think David Johnson is a guy who would be awesome in this Tampa Bay backfield. They probably wouldn't have to be on the hook for that entire contract. I'm sure if they negotiated a trade, they could find a way to get Arizona to pay a piece for that. A piece of that contract. And David Johnson's a guy who, when we saw him be the fantasy football running back one, he was with Bruce Arians. He knows how to utilize him on the ground. He knows how to utilize him in the passing game. I think that would be a great 1-2 punch with Ronald Jones. I'm not saying David Johnson would go and be the David Johnson of old, but I think he could come in and be effective and help Ronald Jones out as well. And Jones is a guy we saw make massive strides in 2019. His rookie year, it looked like he was a total bust. He was done. Second round draft pick, and he came in and he had like 2.4 yards per carry, only had like 40 or 50 carries on the entire season. And actually of guys that played in 2019 that had at least 100 carries, Ronald Jones had not only the biggest increase in carries from 18 to 19, but the biggest increase in yards per carry. So we not only saw his volume get exponentially bigger in 2019, but we saw that yards per carry go up as well, so he was more efficient with it. So if Ronald Jones can take another step forward as a runner, he could be a guy that's a serious weapon for this Tampa Bay offense, and if he gets anyone to help him out that's better than Peyton Barber, I think they could be a really dynamic team on the ground, and that can just help out their passing game, help out Jameis Winston if they want to bring him back. I know Winston gets a lot of heat for the season he had this past season, the 30 interception
30
season,
vision.
But when you think about it, they're, like you said, they don't have a starter in the secondary, so they're throwing the ball a ton because they're giving up a lot of points, and they're also struggling on the ground. So when you put those things together and you know the defense knows you're throwing the ball and you got a guy like Winston who's willing to throw the ball down the field, things are bound to happen. So I think he could improve from an efficiency standpoint, and the first way to do that is the running game. So yeah, I love Ronald Jones as a guy who can continue to break out, and I think David Johnson, I'm going to say it every single time we talk about them until he's not on the Buccaneers. I think David Johnson's a guy to look out for.
I certainly like the David Johnson fit, but Ronald Jones, man, he could be very interesting. Whether they draft a rookie or maybe they don't do anything, maybe they just bring in maybe they bring in Jordan Howard, right? Like I would love the Jordan Howard Ronald Jones duo there in that RBBC. So maybe that happens, and there's some fantasy value in that backfield. We'd love to see them run the ball a little bit more. Hopefully, with Jameis improving a bit, they can make those strides.